Good evening. So, this book, the last time I spoke about a book, I said to Lib, who was sat next to me, what should I read next? And she said, read a Sixth Doctor book. And I just wandered off to the shelves and found this one, which has the highly attractive name for a Doctor Who fan of Blue Box, which I think is some reference to something computery, some real life reference, but maybe if anybody knows, they can tell me. But what is of most relevance to this right now on this front cover is this name of the mighty Kate Orman. Now, I have realised, subsequent to reading this, that I've read a number of Kate Orman books. I've read a number of Doctor Who books. And upon recognising that I've read them, I thought, hold on, I like all of these books. They were all good for different reasons. So I started this book. Now, I think there is an era in Doctor Who book publishing, and I'm by no means an expert. I mean, I've read what I've read, but where they were selling to a very dedicated group of people, and were more than content with just selling to those people. So we're talking sort of McCoy through to the revival, I suppose. So we're talking, New Adventures, Virgin New Adventures, into this BBC, which was prompted by the TV movie and whatnot like that. Subsequent to that, before that, it was all Target novelisations and stuff like that, which obviously had an audience, but it was an audience. Those books were designed to sell to as many people who like Doctor Who as possible. After the revival, we were making new stories, but they're all very, at least the ones I've read, are very traditional. But during that period, since what you've got is the hardcore fans, the books could, should they want to, experiment. And this book is as experimental a Doctor Who book as I think I've read, which is, we're still in the parameters of a Doctor Who book. Please don't think, look, I'm not being critical of Doctor Who books, but Doctor Who books, Doctor Who books. I read Doctor Who books because they're my equivalent of a crime fiction, I suppose. Some people read crime fiction who then go off and read Dickens and God knows what else. I read plenty of, pretentious nonsense, and then I read Doctor Who books to make me happy, and to give me that sort of, a different take on reading. This book is absolutely fantastic. It's just so good. So to give the premise, Kate Orman's established this as being there's a word for this. What's the word when there's a sound? It'll come to you in a moment. But the book exists within the narrative of the book. This is the book that's been written by somebody called Chick Peters, who is a journalist who in the 1980s, and they are a computer journalist. He's a computer journalist, and he stumbles across a story that involves somebody called Swan, who Sarah Swan, I think, although she gets referred to as Swan pretty consistently after that, who is like a kick-ass computer hackery type person, but who has a company now and is very powerful within the realms of early computer technology. And Chick Peters runs into a mysterious character called the Doctor and his friend Perry. And the book presents itself as a sort of hard-hitting piece of journalism about an event that transpired whereby some advanced technology was at stake, and Chick Peters is convinced that this is, Russian technology, but the Doctor keeps saying, no, it's alien. And so you get this quite magnificent, weird Doctor Who book that has been an absolute joy to read. Now, let me just say this before I go any further. This is the time of year when I struggle with any kind of cerebral activity, and sometimes even a Doctor Who book defeats me. I've absolutely loved reading through this, but there are some aspects of it, if I'm critical about it, I think it's more to do with me than it. So let's get the critical aspects out of the way. For quite a period in the middle of this book, it did feel like the Doctor and co were just sort of like ambling around, doing, they go from place to place and something would happen, then go somewhere else and something would happen. That sounds like the plot for a story, but it did feel a little bit more pronounced than this. Now, that may have something to do with the fact that the conceit of its of its structure with this like parody type novel. But that is not to say I wasn't thoroughly entertained all the way. I've actually been talking about this at school in last week, saying that if this was on a phone, go with me on this, I would swipe to do something different now and again, because there were moments where I just think, oh, come on, get to the doctor. And then you turn to the page and you're like, oh, there's the next bit. That's more to do with me than the book, I have to say. But in setting this around 1980s early computer technology, with some, I don't know how, I'm assuming, I'm going to give all the credit to Kate Orman in the world because I think Kate Orman's amazing. I'm assuming that all of the computery stuff in there is fairly accurate, or at least is close enough to accurate to be passable. So there would occasionally be some computer-related stuff about modems and things like that, what I couldn't quite get, and they'd have to go and get this, and then there would be phone tapping and then tricks with phones. One of my favourite bits involved being in a MUD. Now, I've used the phrase MUD before, multi-user something or other, like a chat room type thing where you go, or a game, and the Doctor confronts Swan in that, and it's brilliant. I haven't had much experience of that thing, sort of side of computing, but enough to know, oh yeah, that's what that feels like. Absolutely fantastic. Alongside all that, you get this unusual, I mean, it's not unusual, no, it is unusual, this plot, but of sort of like almost low-key type plot. The stakes are high, but in the way that the Doctor's solving problems here, it's a sort of quite almost Third Doctor-y. So we've got to go and get this piece of tech, and then this will work here, and like it's kind of very couched in the time. So we're having to use all the computer technology that's available, which makes for a really refreshing take on the Sixth Doctor, who in this is in a black suit with outlandish ties and sock, which is really, really good fun. Kate Orman has done an absolutely bang-on Sixth Doctor. I can hear Colin Baker saying so many of these lines. There's that slight pompousness, but with that avuncular nature that Libby has pointed out to me, she thinks is quite pronounced with the Sixth Doctor, which I admit I'd never noticed before, but that's certainly true in this book. And the way that the Sixth Doctor deals with all these troubles in this issue is in keeping of the time of the 1980s, which again makes for a really fun, refreshing read. There's a lovely take on Perry in this book, who's having doubts about remaining with the Sixth Doctor. She is treated like a proper human, as opposed to, the new companion. At one point, she has a drag on a cigarette, which is weird. No, I mean, companions obviously do that. Of course they do that. They have done that. But it makes her such a real person. There's nods towards her sexuality, but not in the really awkward way. What did I read? Bullet Time, some time ago. I talked about that with Sarah Jane and the Seventh Doctor, and makes reference to having sex in that. Oh, I can't deal with that, Sarah Jane having sex. But just the fact that Perry's a young woman, she obviously has, she has a sex life, whether it's internal at the moment in this point in life, or expressed physically or whatever. So all that kind of thing, brilliant. There's a lovely character called Bob, who's this like nerd. We said with great affection, of course, I'm king of the nerds in my school, who the Doctor picks up because he needs Bob, and Bob's brilliant, and Bob helps out, and that's really cool. There's an odd cast of weird, geeky characters who are also like hackers and things like that. Swan's a brilliant baddie. You get a real sense that even though the stakes are very different to a lot of the books I've been reading, she comes across as a force. The really peculiar, right? Okay, so no spoilers, but there is a revelation towards the end of this book concerning the characters that we've met along the way, and I have to say it feels so amazingly prescient that I'm curious to know. I don't know anything about Kate Orman apart from she's a brilliant Doctor Who writer, but whether there's some connection with Kate Orman's life, I hope I'm not overstepping the bounds by saying that, but there is a revelation in this book that just feels very, very real, very, very now, very, very lovely. Just was utterly charming, and all the way through the book I'm thinking there's something off here, there's something I'm missing. I'm not saying I've spotted something, this is laid, the groundwork is laid, but when the penny drops towards the end, especially now, I just find myself going, oh, right. Oh, awesome. Okay. Really lovely. I can't say any more because I want you to read this book. I really want you to read this book. Anyway, the other thing I'm going to say is this, and I can't not touch upon this. There are some slurs in this book. Now, within the context of the conceit of the book, the slurs they don't feel too out of place. Within the context of a Doctor Who book, they feel hideously out of place. In the hands of a lesser writer, I think I would take it to task. I think that the slurs probably haven't aged as well as the nice the thing that arrives at the end. And I do think that were Kate, I don't know, because again, not putting words in people's mouth, who am I? I'm an idiot librarian. But perhaps Kate Orman wouldn't put some of the words that she puts in this book if she was to rewrite it today. But there is nothing in this that greatly wounded me, and I'm overly sensitive about these things at the best of the times. Admittedly, they are not things that pertain to me, and therefore, whatever. But genuinely, nearly 12 minutes, it is time for bed. This book, considering this was one that Libby just basically pointed me towards by saying I should read a Colin Baker book, has utterly enthralled me. I'm not saying that at any particular point I wasn't like, oh, come on, let's get out of the car now, let's do something. But every moment something new occurred. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Or, oh, that's a really good take on Perry. Or, oh, what's this thing? I'm curious about that. The whole sort of, I nearly had the word, it's not didactic, that's the different word. It's the word, I used it when I was talking about, forget about it. It'll come to me after I finish. But the fact that we've got this artefact written by a character within the book is a beautiful thing and just makes me super duper happy. And if I can find another book on my shelf of stuff that plays so joyously with what the context of a book can be, as this one does, and so effectively, I will be most surprised and a very happy Doctor Who reader. No idea what I'm going to read next. I've got a graphic novel I need to finish about the end of the world. Actually about the end of the world. So we'll touch upon that when I get there. My gosh, I'm so delighted to have read this book. Yes, Dusty, and you enjoyed it too. It was good. Bye-bye.